You track your spending. Every purchase goes in. Every subscription is accounted for. The ones you didn't need, you canceled them already. You meal prep on Sundays. You set the savings transfer before anything else leaves the account. You read the articles. You watch the videos. You follow the advice that everyone agrees is correct. You do all of it. You have been doing all of it for a while now. And somehow, every month you end up in exactly the same place. The problem isn't your discipline. The problem is that discipline is the wrong tool for the system you're actually in. Most financial advice was built for a specific world, a world where income grows steadily over time, where costs stay roughly predictable year to year, where following the rules produces the expected result. That world existed for a generation. For a large number of people, it no longer does. The system the advice was written for has changed. The advice hasn't caught up. When you track your spending, you are doing something real. You are doing the right thing. But tracking spending assumes the problem is spending. What if the problem isn't your spending? What if the problem is the structure your spending exists inside? Here is what that actually looks like. You earn an income. A portion goes immediately to fixed costs, rent or mortgage, utilities, insurance, phone. A portion goes to debt repayments. A portion goes to the unpredictable things, the car repair, the medical bill, the appliance that breaks, the thing you could not have planned for but that arrives anyway. What is left is what you are supposed to save, invest, and build a future with. For a lot of people, that remainder is very small. Sometimes it is nothing, and no amount of discipline changes that structure. Discipline can only operate within the margin that structure leaves behind. If the margin is thin, discipline has very little to work with. But there is something underneath this that nobody addresses directly, and once you see it, the whole pattern makes a different kind of sense. The advice you were given assumes a surplus exists. Save 20% of your income, invest consistently, let compound interest do the work over time. All of that is true inside a specific set of conditions. The advice was written for those conditions. It does not tell you what to do when the structure of your costs has consumed the surplus before it has a chance to exist. It assumes the surplus is there. It was written for people for whom the surplus was there. Here is what makes it worse. The financial behaviors that look most responsible from the outside are often the ones that feel worst from the inside. You are tracking everything. You are saying no. You are doing the visible, effortful, unglamorous work of being good with money, and the outcome still does not match the effort. So you assume the problem is you. You assume you are not disciplined enough. You add another rule, another layer of restriction, another month of harder effort inside the same structure, and the structure does not change, because you cannot discipline your way out of an architectural problem. Here is the part nobody warns you about. Discipline has a cost. The psychological weight of sustained financial restriction is real. The mental load of tracking every purchase, saying no to everything that is not essential, living inside a budget that barely works, that cost accumulates month after month. At some point, the restriction breaks, not because you are weak, because sustained restriction without visible progress is not a sustainable system for any human being. The advice does not account for that cost. It treats the person following it like a spreadsheet, not a person with a limit. So here is what changes when you look at this clearly. The problem was never your discipline. The problem is that you were handed a set of tools and told they would fix something they were never designed to fix. Discipline is a personal tool. It operates at the level of individual behavior, what you buy, what you cut, what you track. The system producing your financial outcome operates at a completely different level. It operates at the level of structure, your fixed costs, your income ceiling, your debt architecture, the economy you are living inside. You cannot fix a systems problem with a personal tool. That is not a reflection on the tool. That is a design mismatch. You did everything right. You did the spreadsheet. You meal prepped. You canceled the subscriptions. You said no when you were supposed to say no. You tried harder when it didn't work the first time. You gave this your real effort, and you still ended up here. That is not a character failing. That is what happens when disciplined people are placed inside systems that produce this outcome regardless of their effort. The system was doing this before you arrived. Your discipline was never the variable that mattered most. So what are the actual rules this system runs on? The first rule, financial progress is determined more by structure than by behavior. Where you live, what your fixed costs are, what debt you carry, what income ceiling you are working within. These are structural variables. Discipline operates in the margin between them. If the margin is small, discipline has very little leverage. The second rule, financial advice is written for the median case, the median income, the median cost of living, the median debt level. Your situation may not be the median case. Advice calibrated for a different situation will produce different results in your situation. That is not a failure of the advice. It is a context mismatch. The third rule, the way out of a structural problem is structural change, not more discipline. Different fixed costs, higher income, resolved debt, different leverage points. These changes are harder than adjusting your spending habits. They take longer. They are less visible day to day, but they are the variables that actually move the number at the bottom of the spreadsheet. Discipline is not useless, but it is not the primary variable, and treating it as the primary variable while the structural variables remain unchanged, that is the trap. The next time the month ends and the number hasn't moved, notice what you do with that information. Most people turn it inward. They decide they didn't try hard enough. They add another rule, another layer of restriction, another month of harder effort inside the same structure. And the structure does not change, because you cannot discipline your way out of an architectural problem. The spreadsheet doesn't need to be better. The system the spreadsheet exists inside, that is worth examining.